All right, welcome everybody to our June monthly higher ed call. It's very exciting to have such a good turnout tonight. And this is, of course, one of our climate career connections calls. So our typical calls are strategizing and organizing calls for all of you college leaders to get together and think about how to best bring more students into the climate movement. But we also know that because you are all students yourself, we're all looking for different career opportunities, studying a bunch of different things in our different disciplines. And so every quarter, we like to put a focus on one of those different areas of work and show you how you can turn a career in pretty much anything you're studying, any major you're in, into a career that's positive for climate. So with that, I'm very excited that today we're getting to focus on engineering as one of those career pathways that can make a positive impact on climate change. And really pleased to be joined by two fabulous young leaders in the climate space as well, who I've had the pleasure of interacting with through the Aspen Institute for Energy and Environment, through their climate summit. And they were gracious enough to carve out some time from their very busy schedules. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. In the meantime, if you all wouldn't mind, as guests, just introducing yourselves in the chat, tell us a little bit about where you're based, what university you attend, if you're still in school, anything else you'd like to share about your involvement with CCL so that Edward and Robert can get a bit of a sense of who's in the room tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to our fabulous presenters, and let's go ahead and let's start with Edward. Why don't you do us the honors of kicking us off and telling us just a bit about yourself?
Awesome, sweet. Thanks for the intro, Stephanie. And I want to thank everyone for showing up onto the Zoom call and this event. The passion is really awesome to see. So a little bit about me. I'm an environmental engineer by discipline. So a lot of people, they're like, what is that? 40 years ago, it was sort of called like forest engineering, and it was sort of a subset of civil engineering. But now, right, as governments and the public sector and everyone's waking up to the importance of the environment, it's sort of blossoming. So, what is environmental engineering? I mean, it's anything from wastewater treatment to public health, to air treatment facilities, and permit writing for public agencies, or monitoring federal laws. It's really an umbrella org, and environmental engineers basically are polymaths. They go into all different fields. And from my experience, it's usually, you'll see an environmental engineer on a team with civil engineers or mechanical engineers, and everyone's, everyone needs one of those people on their team now. So I went to a school called SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry. Not sure if any of you guys have heard it. It's like super geeky and super focused on the environment. But if you want an environmental engineering program, it is, I think, ranked like number 2 or number 1 in the country. So that's just a little bit about myself. I've worked in federal and state agencies as well. So that's thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Robert, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Stephanie, and great to see you too, Edward. Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Fetell. I am a graduate student at MIT studying civil and environmental engineering. I specialize in a subset of civil engineering called geotechnical engineering, which is sort of similar to geology, but essentially what it does is it deals with soil and rock as engineering materials. So think dams, bridge abutments, mining and mine waste storage facilities, water management, anything that sort of deals with the interface of the built environment with the natural environment. But yeah, so I guess a little bit about my experience. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, where I studied geology, and I also got a master's in engineering geology there. I worked as an engineer for NextEra Energy, which is the world's largest producer of wind and solar power, or so they claim. I've also worked for Ramboll, a Danish civil engineering firm, doing some back-end coding work on some wastewater treatment facilities. So a few different roles that are not necessarily related to my academic training. And I've also worked for the city of Miami Beach, on the Land Uses and Sustainability Committee, where I did a variety of tasks related to stormwater and water supply systems. And I also founded a 501c3 called the Resilience Youth Network, which focuses on youth climate leadership, particularly with regards to the effects of climate change on communities in the built environment. Happy to talk more about my research and my career interests later, but that's sort of an overview. I've tried a bunch of different things in the engineering space, and I think that's what's helped me sort of narrow my focus and interest on raw materials and mining to supply the things we need for renewable energy and electric vehicles.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you to both of you for that great overview. I know it's difficult to cram down these really robust CVs that you both have into just a couple of minutes and give us some insights. That was fantastic. And we will get to dig into more of it. Of course, for our audience members, we do have time for audience questions at the end of kind of the pre-programmed panel discussion. So be thinking about those and dropping them in the chat as they come to you. But we'll just dive right in, getting to know each other a little bit better. And, you know, Rob, you were just mentioning your efforts, not only like in your research interests and the work experience that you've had, but also I think something that's great about both of you is your engagement with different organizations. And in your case, both of your cases, actually starting organizations to be able to have this positive impact in the world. So that requires a lot of passion. And I imagine there's a long backstory. So I'm curious, for Rob first, and Edward, if you'd like to jump in, what drew you to the climate movement and to engineering as a solution for climate change, and like the way that you would contribute to that crisis, or like to mitigating that crisis?
Rob, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the word for me is personal. I think it's personal on like a human and emotional level. For all of us in different ways. I mean, chances are everyone here has a story that sort of impelled them to care about climate change. For me, it was growing up in Miami Beach. We had a major Hurricane Wilma come, and I vividly remember sleeping with my flashlight because we lost power, and our street literally turned into a river. And when I woke up in the morning, we had flopping fish on our lawn. And so you may not be able to draw a direct relationship between that and climate change. But as I got older and I started to learn more about the increasing severity and frequency of extreme weather, that sort of memory stuck with me. And that's what drove me originally to get really interested in climate resilience. And then I would say the other half of the personal bit, not just like the personal experience, but just sort of personal motivation, is that I think you can have a really amazing and lucrative career that's impact oriented by being an engineer in the climate space. Especially as a young person, I think that, and look, I don't know, I'm just, 24 and still in school, but I think it's a wise way to position yourself as a technical specialist in the early part of your career, because that can open up a lot more doors for what you do later, whether it's management, operations, or sort of the investing side. So to summarize, I guess what got me interested was the sort of personal, emotional side, and then also what a career in this could do for me in terms of the impact oriented fulfillment, but also the fact that our federal government just gave out more money than anyone's given out for anything ever, and that's a huge opportunity for us young people as young professionals.
That's great, Rob. So yeah, my story is also very similar to that. Instead of Miami Beach, I grew up in New York City, and so I mean, I was probably one of those like spaced out kids who knew from like a young age, like I'm gonna change the world, like I'm gonna save the planet, so very young, constantly reading National Geographic articles, constantly, devouring Scientific American, like all those amazing headlines that you guys know, where like, oh, scientists invented this, and oh, they just came out with this breakthrough. But then walking through our city and really just the disconnect is like, hey, where is that? Where are these amazing solar photovoltaic innovations in our cities? Where are the nuclear thorium reactors that I was promised at that TED talk? So yeah, so I mean, with me just sort of bouncing around, I mean, I tried out activism in high school. I went to a lot of protests. Love the activism bent still far. But I found that from a personal level, it didn't really, I didn't see much change happening. And so I realized, I was like, wait, maybe we can approach this from a building perspective, solutions, working together with people. And so it was around high school where I was started maybe let's explore engineering, maybe a nuclear engineering, chemical engineering, maybe any way where we can sort of bridge these new amazing technologies and sort of build them within the fabric of our societies. So then I settled on environmental engineering, and it's sort of been a roundabout way. And I know this touches upon like a question you have later, Stephanie, but I would say what's so amazing about engineering is that it's not only about the STEM, it's about like working together with people, and like you may forget a lot of the stuff you learn in school. Like to be honest, I don't remember like a lot of it, but what you do take away is the ability to work with anybody and the ability to work in teams, I would say, and problem solve. That's the one thing I took away from college.
So are you saying that all of our group projects and classes, like we should be a little more focused on learning how to collaborate and work together well than on complaining about that one group member who doesn't seem to be doing anything?
Yeah, it's funny, like it's so funny, like you think once I'm out in the real world things will be different, but it's like the same personalities and the same archetypes that you encounter now, you guys see in your academic work groups. They're in the workplace. They're just, some people have changed, some people got self-aware and grew up, but other people just, they're still doing the same thing in the job, so it's a very good thing to do.
So it might be a natural segue, and this may not be the toughest challenge you've ever faced, but what are some of the toughest challenges you've each faced working in this space? And I guess we can go to Edward first and then Rob.
Yeah, sure. So for my first role out of college, I worked in the Federal Aviation Administration. So I was part of a new task force. It was about 12 of us from all over the country, 12 years, who had never worked together, for like 12 years. Environmental engineers were always, subordinate and sort of, just check, fill out forms. That's something a lot of you guys may resonate with, that, that your disciplines are constantly evolving. And so now, I mean, we're more important, this whole cause is more important. So we were forming our first unit for the first time, but there was a lot of ego, and there were some, when we're dealing with the government, there's a lot of, bureaucracy and things like, oh, you guys aren't supposed to have this much jurisdiction, and like ego and stuff. And I mean, those were also during the, the crazy political years of the Biden dash Trump, those things where people were really, I mean, it started becoming like a war, in the agencies. So just long story short, I realized I had to sort of play politics, very, very, I mean, straight out of college, and I was like, whoa, maybe I should watch like House of Cards or something. But that may be a reality with some of you guys. I mean, we're at this forefront of this new space. So like, not only do you have to worry about your 9 to 5, and your duties, you may have to build alliances, you may have to build like social capital, and you may find yourself doing things that you didn't think, your university would prepare you for, but it's just, you just go with it.
Rob, over to you.
I think your question was the biggest challenge. Is it like you
Yeah.
engineer in the space?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go macro with this one. I think it's sort of finding your angle within the broad climate space, because there's so much you can do. I think when young people decide that this is what they want to focus on, at least it was for me, you just sort of want to soak it all in, and you just want to do something, you want to do good. But I find that maybe it takes a lot of time and effort to discover what it is that really within that broader climate movement gets you excited. So for me, I can only speak from my experience. I'm a geotechnical engineer, so my skills are with software and techniques that deal with the mechanics of soils and whatnot. And I thought, okay, in the broader context of this, how can I apply this sort of training I've developed for my own like personal intellectual interests in school to to make a difference? And I sort of landed on this very specific problem, which is mine waste storage, which you may or may not realize is we produce like 200 times as much waste from a typical mine as you do useful material. And not to get off on a tangent about my research, but I'm just trying to illustrate that finding a very specific subset as an engineer that you become a quasi expert in can be hugely valuable to you in what you do after. And I think, I think that's a lot of trial and error. I think honestly, all right, now that I think of it, I think the biggest challenge is finding the right mentors. I think that's what it really comes down to. If you identify someone and cultivate a relationship with them, or they see something in you and you want to aspire to be more like them, I mean, that in my experience is what's really made the difference. So I think that the challenge is figuring out who it is that you can learn a lot from and what you admire in them, and then going from there, as well as finding your own niche within the broader landscape.
Oh yeah. I just have something to chime in. You like those great points just triggered something, so I just want to throw it in there. Another big challenge is a lot of you guys or maybe encounter is that, like imposter syndrome, and it's like a lot of the times, right, in these hectic job environments, you get trained for something and who knows, like some people on the team may leave and now boom, you're like doing the work of like 2 people, or you're doing the work of like 30, like someone who's like way older than you, and just realize that like no one, even like your boss, is sort of winging it, and that's like a secret I'll like share right now. Everyone's just winging it. No one knows exactly what they're doing. Everyone's just sort of so a lot of the people that you think are like, oh, they're superior to me, but like they're also figuring out with you. And so once you recognize that, it's becomes easier.
That is definitely one of the best pieces of wisdom that has come with age for me, is just realizing like we are all humans. We will all have our moments where we doubt ourselves or where we fail epically. And if you can realize that everybody from like the highest levels of leadership all the way down to like the intern who's getting coffee for you, they're all having those moments and those internal battles, it suddenly just like levels the playing field in a really like magical way. And just makes you feel, I think, better internally. And yes, definitely all still learning. So Edward, you like have had all of these different experiences in engineering, and then I know you have this really cool project in Quintana Roo, and I'm curious, like how did you get from point A to point B? Like what made you take that engineering passion into a way to really bring together these multiple different stakeholder groups and be able to serve those different communities?
So to be honest, I sort of fell into it, and it became a way, like I thought I was just on vacation in Quintana Roo. Like, so for those of you guys who don't know, there's Cancun, right? Everyone knows Cancun, right? But Quintana Roo is like the larger peninsula that holds Cancun. I was just on vacation. But I found that like even while I was away from my 9 to 5 job, my work followed me. So just not to just make this about myself, but like very often you'll find that what you do in your job follows you into the complete, like just outside of that, and that's what environmentalism is becoming. So I've quickly found that my ability to work with chemists, with chemical engineers, with environmental specialists, with permitting folks, Not to mention the fact that I spoke Spanish, realized like everyone who came to me had a little piece, had a little problem, oh, I'm working on a little project that hasn't gone anywhere. I was like, so like Rob, I've also started a US 501c3, but I've also created a for-profit as well. But I realized quickly that like people need help, I mean, it may not seem like it, but the discipline that you guys study right now, I know it's so dredging with the tests and everything, but it's so critically needed around the world. And you may not feel like it, but just so many people are dying for solutions, in their communities. And so what we're tackling with is, this brown algae sargassum that's washing up on Florida and Mexico everywhere. I'm not going to get too much into the details, but I will say that like having that engineering background and that ability to navigate the spaces that I used to work at, is critical for making this project, take off now, because you're going to see the same faces, so like, don't burn bridges, just sort of, you may see the same people again, and guys may work together down the road.
Yeah, it's definitely a small world for sure. It seems like everywhere I go in the climate space, there's always like, oh, I remember you from like several years ago at this other event. You were doing something really different, and like now you're here. That's wonderful, and our paths tend to cross like that. So it's good to keep that relationship building. I'm going to start transitioning us towards like the more like practical, for I am currently in school and these are the burning questions that keep me up at night. But I do know we have more like specific or technical and disciplinary questions in the chat, and I'm sure we'll have more of them as we get to Q&A. But just so that everybody knows where we're headed to next, is just to know like what's the most useful or applicable class you ever took and why. Let's either one of you can start. So Edward, go ahead.
Rob, do you want to start or? Okay, all right, I'll just go. For me, it was like water an incredible journey, senior year at SUNY ESF, and there was a guy who taught it. He was like, I mean, the guy was like Dumbledore, I mean, everyone just came away from him with some pieces of wisdom. But what was very important in that project was like finally, so just to be completely transparent, I'm not the best, like I didn't get the best. I wasn't that kid, with like 4.0, his freshman, sophomore year. That came later once I moved away from like the very intense classes, like all right, there's chem 2 and linear, right, differential equations and all of that. I think I started excelling once we moved away from those hard classes into the more project-based management, where we're working in groups. Now we're having presentations. Now we're having, hey, let's solve ocean acidification. So it's completely cool if you guys don't really excel at everything in university, as long as you'll find something that really resonates with you, and that's what matters. And right, like C's get degrees. So yeah, that class was great because it taught me how to just work and deliver things, and we were working with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So like those real world projects, they hit around like junior, senior year. Those are amazing, important. You may actually meet your coworkers or your future bosses from those like capstone projects.
Rob, how about you? What was the most useful class you ever took and why?
Yeah, for me, it's hands down introduction to data analysis with Python. I think that just basic like knowledge of coding and algorithmic thinking is hugely useful, especially in the age that we're entering. You don't even necessarily have to use it in your job or, for whatever project you're working on. But I just think it's good to have like a baseline grasp of like how it works and what the capabilities are. It's also fun. It's like pretty cool to work with. And you never know how it's going to be useful. And I would say Python in particular, because it's open source. So, if you struggle, so I know there are PhD students on here, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but like you can basically look at pretty much, a wealth of things that other people have done and just bring that into yours. And it's not plagiarism. There's nothing wrong with it. And I think there's a really beautiful spirit to this open source movement where like everyone's sharing what they're doing and what they produce to just make better, you know, problem solving algorithms or projects or whatever it might be. So for me, it's hands down like a Python coding class.
I always love asking that question to people because it's normally surprising for folks that it's not necessarily like the top class in your discipline or in your major. Like sometimes it's that random philosophy course you had to take in your freshman year that like opened your eyes to seeing the world in a whole different way. And then there's also these like super technical things that you may not realize are applicable across so many different disciplines, like understanding coding. Which like, as you're saying that, I'm like, that's a major deficiency in my own training and maybe I should be looking into a Python class. And that's the magic of the internet also. A lot of that is available. All right, so the last question I have for both of you, and I do want to also give you each more of a chance to talk about some of your other, like Rob, your research and also your work with Resilience Youth Network, Edward, like your various different engagements. Just give you a little bit more space to talk about those. But before we get to that, what is the best advice you've ever gotten? Edward, go ahead. Yeah.
I would say like say yes to everything, show up to everything, anything you're invited to, say yes, make time for, anyone, because you don't know, like you never know who you're talking to. It's just like a lot of like major things have happened. I mean, I've seen it at campus and at these forums where I met Stephanie. Like a lot of things happen, just people are just grabbing food together, or they're at a smoothie shop, and the universe sort of brings you together with the people you're meant to work with. And it may not it may feel like, whoa, like this isn't what I'm used to, because we're all used to like, oh, applying for jobs and like long painful application processes. But hey, the people you're meant to work with you just may meet them in like a library or something. So the best advice I would say is to just really have an open mind, and just you don't know, like just speak to basically keep yourself open. Yeah.
Rob, what was the best advice you ever got?
Honestly, I'm having trouble. My grandfather told me this stupid little saying, but it sort of stuck with me. No guts, no glory. Almost like you know, and I've stuck by it, and it's gotten me in trouble more than once, but I stand by it because I think more often than not, when you're afraid to do something, or approach someone, or try something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, more often than not, it works out well. So I guess just be willing to be a bit gutsy and get out of your comfort zone. I think that as a young person, that'll pay huge rewards.
That is great advice. And yes, hashtag YOLO. Great. All right. I know there was kind of one question in the chat already. Rob started kind of answering it already regarding geothermal as an alternate energy source. As folks kind of take a minute or two to think about what questions they might have, do either one of you just want to share a little bit more about some of the other projects you didn't really get to touch on as much today? And then we'll take questions from the audience. You can type them in the chat if you'd like, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Well, I'm actually, I just want to say it out here. I'm actually interested in, I know there's a large audience here, and I know some of you guys, some of them are in university, but like if anyone has like little passion projects they're working on, I'd love to hear about that, and maybe stuff that they need help with, and then we could turn this into like more of like a free for all. But like, I'm just going to put my thing in the chat, and like, but like, I'd love to hear about what some other people are doing, like if just extracurriculars or
Anybody like to share anything?
Come on, guys. No guts, no glory.
I know, right? Like you just got this great advice.
Well, I can
It's,
share.
yeah, okay.
Hey, go, Philip.
Yeah. So I've just recently graduated from my undergraduate school, William and Mary, and I'm going to be starting a master's degree in mechanical engineering in the fall. So I actually do have a couple of more specific questions, but I think right now I'm more focused on the political side, but I am going to be, as I get older, transitioning more to this technical side. So um, a big focus right now is actually I'm working with someone who I'd like to shout out, my friend Emily, who started this CFD movement, which stands for carbon fee and dividend. And kind of we're trying to start another subset of climate activism focused kind of more in line with CCL's values than, or just an alternative form of activism to what people have had. And I think that is a way of getting more people involved too. So that's something exciting that I'm doing.
That's really cool. Like carbon fee and dividend, is that like sort of like divesting or like carbon taxes or something like that? That sounds,
Yeah, so it's
You're on the right call for that question.
yeah. One of the main things that CCL supports, and actually it used to be the only thing that CCL supports, is the carbon fee and dividend, which is a form of a carbon tax.
cool.
There are a few more folks sharing in the chat, so I just want to amplify some of those. So Patrick's passion is the impact of climate change on human nutrition and child development in the global south, which is incredibly important. And I think finally getting more of the attention it merits. I literally just got an email today from some UN listserv I'm on about exactly that, like the intersection of climate change and nutrition and climate refugees as well. And I think that's one population where that's felt quite strongly. Rachel has a wonderful question. As an educator, all of her students have to do 2 semesters worth of research as well as an internship. You both have had experiences in both of these and now are also in positions where you might be able to help students. How might students connect with people like the 2 of you for opportunities for research or for experiential learning and internships? What are some good resources that maybe have helped you as you've built your career, and or are you looking for people to support your efforts?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say like this takes me back to the days of like university. A lot of times like your professors are also maybe looking for people to work in the labs, and they may have space. They just are so bogged down with grading papers that they don't really vocalize it, and they have to also juggle being a teacher. So a lot of the times on campus, if you just go up to your professors at the end of the class and start to talk to them and connect with them as a person, a lot of the times like I've a lot of people I know in college, they would be able to get like things at their campus maybe in the summer, just by speaking to the professor, and 9 times out of 10 they were like, yeah, we have something. So I'm out of that space right now, but that's what I would say. And I think Rob had some good things. Okay.
Yeah, on this question, I think the only advice I have is the sooner the better. Like, get on it as early as possible in the school year. These programs start early if you're on their radar, like that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, also like I think every university should have like a career center, and I'm certain that like every university has those, like consortium where they have alumni who come back to speak. So it's like if Rob and I can't really get you guys hooked up, to a job, with our work, there may be things on your campus. And it's like you know, you got to treat it as like an open world video game, you know, just show up and just start talking to the office.
Yeah, and I do know that MIT does a program for undergraduates interested in research to apply and then spend the summer here and get placed in a lab. I forget the name of the program, but if you want, I can find that out for you.
I'd like to bring up a new initiative that is trying to pull universities in close collaboration with industry to reduce industrial emissions. That perhaps this group here might be interested in that. One of my close colleagues was a president of American Institute of Chemical Engineers in 2020. He's at Penn State University. Anybody from Penn State here today? Anyway, he's a professor there, but he worked in industry for most of his career. Now he's probably about in his early 60s, but he convinced the board of directors of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers to put some funding into providing a little staff to get this idea off the ground, and it's called the Sustainable Energy Corps. And his vision is that well, I'm an engineer, and we're both chemical engineers, but all the engineering and scientific disciplines could probably work a little bit closer with industry. We know what the worst emitters are, and if we had industry work with the professors who were involved in senior design projects, for example, have the focus being on climate solutions. So I'm going to drop into the chat a climate solution symposium on October 7th. I'm chairing it. It's in person at the University of Houston, and it's also virtual live streamed. And he's the first speaker. And so that's what I wanted to promote, Stephanie. Also, I may send you a little some content on putting a post up for the higher education action team just to promote that symposium. So
Yeah, it'd be great.
that
sounds really exciting.
Yeah, we want to. I had to caution Monty. Montgomery Alger's his name. Anyway, he goes by Monty, and he was a little bit too strident on, we got to reduce these emissions. And I said, well, if you want industry to work with you, we got to tone that rhetoric down a little bit, like you guys are the bad guys and we need, but anyway, so we're kind of working on that. I'll put some links in the chat.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for sharing that. Really quick, you mentioned that it's got a chemical engineering focus. Does that scope include metals processing, smelting, or steel making?
So we have a direction in the Institute now. I'm also the co-founder of a community called the Climate Solutions Community in the Institute. And we know that no discipline can solve this problem on its own. We have to collaborate. And so that community, Climate Solutions Community, is hoping to collaborate with all the other disciplines. And then there's another initiative that's going on now. We're trying to make some progress on that. It's called Climate Solutions Policy Initiative. We engineers don't know how to talk to government. How do we propose ideas in a way that they can best formulate policy? Anyway, and that one is also has within its objectives to engage with all the other disciplines. So I know electrical engineers who tell me this is exactly what we ought to do, and I say, well, okay, but there's more to it than just generating electricity. So we have to collaborate a lot. So.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Tom. So like that you got like toning down the rhetoric, and I know like we're all on the same page here, but as engineers we have to more or less think about innovative solutions that, like everyone can be a part of and everyone can feel included, that really benefit everyone in a better way. And I think that's what draws all of us to engineering. And I've always, from my experience, like the best projects in the government were ones where it wasn't one guy or one person's ego, like, oh, I'm the boss here, oh, like my what I say goes, like it's my way, or like get out. The best projects were always one where everyone sort of added their magic in there, their passion and their flavor. And I mean, it's the only way to really do things, and get really good things going in engineering.
Yeah, if we don't come to agreement on our planet, we're not going to have a livable planet. Yeah.
Very true. Any other questions from folks?
Do you guys both have emails, Robert and Edward? You guys have emails? I'd like to email you later on. I do have some more questions, but it's a little deep.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll put my email address in the chat for sure.
Philip.
Yeah, so my question, going back to kind of Robert, you were saying how hard it is to find like a specific thing to specialize in. And I think that that's something that I've been having a lot of trouble with. So I know you said kind of finding the right mentors, and also I'm sure there are other ways of doing it, but can you go more into like the specifics of like how you did that, like thick tips that helped you and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're doing one of the things right, which is school. Unfortunately, I found that sometimes school doesn't help you figure out what you want to do. It'll help you certainly figure out what you don't want to do. And I've been able to cross off a lot of things. And that's valuable, right? So I think, just keep reminding yourself, if you're crossing things off that you don't want to do, you're still getting closer to figuring out what it is that you are going to do and what you want to do. Second thing about mentors, I mean, my personal experience was a bit bizarre. So COVID sort of threw a wrench in my college life. I was sent home my junior year, and I got really interested in this concept of climate resilience. So the ability of the built environment to withstand hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, etc. And so I found this gentleman online who founded the United Nations Disaster Risk, what was it? Private Sector Advisory Board for Disaster Risk Reduction. He was the chair and founder, and then he wrote a book. So I said, okay. So I just ordered his book. I loved his book. I read his book, and I sent him an email, and now it's been like 4 years now. And he's like my greatest mentor. His nonprofit was the primary contributor to the nonprofit that I founded. And in many ways, he's become like a father figure to me. He was an engineer. He ran a major cement company. And I think that was just my experience. But someone like him can do amazing. I mean, he wrote one of my recommendations to MIT. I think that's sort of a bizarre example. I think a professor is a much easier one. If you really engage on a topic that you're both really passionate about, you sort of have this interchange of every week you procedurally update him on what you're doing with slides or whatever, and say, this is my progress. I'm super excited to work on this together. I think that's probably the most natural way for settings that you and I are in. I also think conferences are great. If you approach somebody at a conference and maybe they spoke and you liked what they had. I've done that before. I just said, oh, I really liked what you said about XYZ, and then got their card, sent them an email, and then had a Zoom call, and then they introduced me to somebody else who I think like I said, just be outgoing. I think clearly you have that sort of gene that a lot of engineers miss, which is this sort of inclination to want to ask questions and talk to people and get involved in things like policy and politics. I think that's terrific. I mean, I hope that was helpful. It was sort of a rambling monologue, but yeah, that's sort of all I got to say.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you to both of you for taking some time. I do want to honor like the 45 minutes I asked of you. We have a couple more like business things on the CCL side of things to do, but if you have to get back to your Monday evenings, it's just been such a pleasure to have you, and thank you for fielding these great questions and just making this a conversational space. It's always best when these calls can be that way. So thank you for being open to that and for sharing your insight.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure being on this call. Thanks for having us.
Of course. See you
Good
on some future ones, hopefully.
All right. So is this a one where like Rob and I can sort of head out and then you guys have your own agenda as well?
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
Good,
Yep.
good luck to all you guys. All right. Hope you crunch through the CCL work. All right. We're doing.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Well, as you all know, hopefully, if you don't know, you're finding out today. We have our conference coming up this weekend and into next week. So there's kind of a lot going on right now. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the information that they needed to be as plugged in as they would like to be with CCL right now. If you have not registered for the June conference, we do have a live stream option available. If you're in the DC area, you can also register as a walk-in. Rates for students are very reasonable, so I hope you'll consider it if you are local, that you'll join us. But if not, the live stream is a fantastic option and it is completely free for everybody. So if you haven't registered yet, I would definitely recommend doing that now. I've just put the link in the chat for that. It's well worth it. Not every single session is going to be live streamed, but all of the main stage events will be, and you'll hear a little bit about the project that Philip was mentioning with Emily. She's going to be speaking on the main stage about that. There's going to be a lot of young people highlighted throughout the conference, so it's a really good one to sign up for. And make sure you catch the recordings if you aren't able to catch them live. If anybody is coming to the conference in person, I'm also looking for volunteers who might help staff our action team table at the action team fair. So if you've not been to a conference before, there's a room right across from registration. That is where all of our action teams convene, and they'll have tables with materials and information. We're going to have a bunch of handouts, and somebody will be there to help answer questions about like what the higher ed action team does. You don't have to be super knowledgeable, just like being there and talking about your own experience, showing up to meetings, using our resources, like whatever it might be. And if you are interested, I'm just putting a link to a spreadsheet in the chat right now that you can sign up for a time slot that's available.
Do those time slots conflict with any of the lobby prep?
They should not. At least not any of the main scheduled one. However, individual teams might decide to meet, like they might decide that on Monday during lunchtime, they're going to have a lobby prep meeting for everybody who's lobbying in New York State, for example. So those things are a little less pre-programmed, but the time slots are all scheduled for like coffee breaks, meal breaks, things like that. So you don't have to miss like main conference programming. And if you do sign up and find that your lobby team has decided they want to practice at that time, that's also perfectly okay. You're welcome to change your mind. Other things also happening in conjunction with the conference is we have our June national call. Happens to be how we will be starting off our conference weekend together, and it will actually be hosted by yours truly. So I hope you'll join me there, and you haven't gotten tired of my voice yet. You won't hear that much of it on that call, I promise. You'll mostly hear Bill McKibben, which is very exciting. And you'll also get to hear from some of our interns. So like I said, lots of opportunities to showcase and highlight what our college student members are doing. So you'll hear from some of them also on the national call. On the note of interns, we have internship applications that are open now through June 15th. And yes, that is like right after the conference. So given that there's a lot going on, just if you are interested in an internship with CCL, we have lots of cool positions. And this cycle, for the first time ever, we actually have an internship with our research department. So if you like to nerd out and read about the most current research in climate, economics, and policy and science, that position would just be perfect for you. So I hope you'll consider applying to that and others. You can access the application at cclusa.org/interns and also see the full position descriptions for each one and see which one's a good fit for you. And lastly, and then I promise I will stop speaking and give anybody a chance to ask questions or contribute any thoughts that they want to workshop. As we were on this call through another listserv, somebody sent me this great event, which is a Climate Careers virtual Q&A, which coincidentally includes a lot of other people that were in the same cohort that Edward and Robert and I were in with the Aspen Institute. So it is a virtual Q&A with different professionals in the climate space who are going to be talking about different barriers to entry and how to get around them if you're interested in building a career in climate. So that looks like it'll be super interesting. It's free and happening on Thursday afternoon. So check it out if you'd like to sign up for that too. And with that, I will pass it over to all of you. If you have any questions or contributions, anything you'd like for the group to know about or talk through with you.
I wanted to ask what kind of opportunities CCL has for people who are not in the States. Next year, I'll be overseas doing some research.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for asking that. So we do have, CCL does have a sister organization, Citizens Climate International. So they specifically focus on like, how can we take the advocacy that we're doing in the US and adapt it to different national contexts where there may not be like a Congress that you can lobby, for example. That's a pretty uniquely US experience. So that might be a good organization to connect with, sort of depending on like what the length of your time abroad is going to be and what opportunities you're looking for. But they do have chapters in many different countries, so there's a pretty good possibility that you'll have one near you. I can grab that link for you.
Sweet, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, there's a link to Citizens Climate International. And oh, yeah, thank you so much for joining, Rachel. It was great to have you on here, and I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, Prachita, thank you so much for the reminder. So at the conference, if you are attending in person, we are hosting a youth mixer for our under 18 youth and also our college students. So if you are going to be around on Monday, that'll be how we officially celebrate being done with all of our sessions. So the last thing that'll happen before the social time that night. And and Philip is going to have a great time because he will be done with his presentation. It'll be the last event. Going to be wonderful. Yeah, please join. We do have a form if you are planning to join us. I can just grab that for you now. But for anybody who is coming to that student meetup, we are ordering pizza, so you can have dinner on CCL's dime. But we would like to make sure that we are providing you with dinner that you can actually eat if you do have any food intolerances or allergies. So you can fill out this form and let us know you're coming. Any other questions? Well, if not, I think we will call this a night and just say again, thank you all so much for coming out and learning a bit more about careers in the engineering space and also just everything that's going on with CCL. It's a really exciting time, but it's also a busy time. So I appreciate you all carving out an hour to stay plugged in, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.